The aspirant need not worry about the opposition between spirit and matter, but should rather concern himself with the proper use of the one as the vehicle of the other. Then he will realize the higher ideals which relate to the actions of everyday life. The living spirit behind love, service, and brotherhood then blossoms out in accomplished deeds and is no longer empty words and academic theories reserved for armchair practice. God's infinite beauty, power, and bliss are experienced with full consciousness in art, science, literature, nature, and all walks of life. Although the unconscious slavery of modern man to the industrial age is a serious matter, the emancipation of mankind from physical and economic slavery is a comparatively easy affair. The real slavery, because it is the most cruel and destructive of all, is the intellectual bigotry which claims to possess an exclusive monopoly on all truth. Uh, I'm kind of lost here. Where are we? Mhm. It is people obsessed by such a belief who, when they happen to be in a position of material power, hasten the downfall of a laboriously built civilization or the disintegration of a living religion. Man can be redeemed from all types of bondage: physical, mental, spiritual, social, political, moral, sooner or later. But the redemption of man from the self imposed shackles of intellectual self sufficiency, uncritically accepted ideals, and a dry religious heritage is a task which is well nigh superhuman. Here is the real task of the aspirant: to pierce through his own layers of self imposed self sufficiency and insensitivity so that he may expose a layer of vital awareness to the world about him, which would teach him, if it could. Often, the aspirant is concerned in the early phases of his awakening by his attitude towards established religions and their rituals. All of these have a tendency to encourage the spirit of love and worship, and as such, they help to a limited extent in wearing out the ego shell in which human consciousness is caught. But if they are followed unintelligently and mechanically, the inner spirit of love and worship dries up. Then they harden the ego shell instead of wearing it out. Rituals and ceremonies cannot one very far towards the path. And if they are unintelligently followed, they bind as much as any other unintelligent action. In fact, when they are deprived of all inner life, they are, in a sense, more dangerous than any other unintelligent action because they are pursued in the belief that they help towards God realization. Due to this element of self delusion, lifeless forms and ceremonies become a sidetrack to the. Can we scroll up a bit? Suffering may be required to dispel their imaginary value. Often the aspirant becomes discouraged when he begins to understand how very long and difficult the path is. But these are persons who are concentrating only on jumping to the final goal and have not yet been caught up in the absorbing challenges which call for the greatest ingenuity at every step of the way. When the aspirant meets the challenge of life's game, it becomes so exhilarating that there is little inclination to worry whether the goal is one or a crore of lifetimes away. A healthy approach to life contains the automatic answer to permission over the distance to be traveled. The man of the world believes that to have understood a thing intellectually is to have learnt it. The true lesson in action, though, involves the wearing out of the sanskaras and the wants they engender. To learn in the sense, it is not enough to comprehend intellectually. Learning may be a lengthy process which moves slowly through many, many repetitions of difficult situations. Learning has not been accomplished until one has been freed from all emotional entanglements. This is almost, if not entirely, impossible without the aid of a master. It is for this reason that when the aspirant realizes the master's true contribution, he greets the master with much joy. All action except that which is intelligently designed to attain God realization binds consciousness. It is not only an expression of accumulated ignorance, but also a further addition act. Instead, but also a further addition to that accumulated ignorance. Sometimes the pilgrim becomes so wary of recognizing that each act, instead of unwinding a knot in their inner being, has only tightened it harder, that he wonders whether it is wise to continue a life of action. In many ways, inaction is preferable to unintelligent action, for it has at least the merit of not creating further sanskaras. Even good action creates sanskaras and adds to the complications created by past actions. All life is an effort to achieve freedom from self centered entanglement.
That's
It is
self created.
self created entanglement. It is a desperate struggle to undo what had been done in ignorance, to throw away the accumulated burden of the past, to seek rescue from the debris piled high from temporary achievements and failures. Life strives to unwind the limiting sanskaras and find release from the mazes of its own making to ensure that its further creations might spring directly from the heart of eternity and bear the stamp of unhampered freedom and intrinsic richness of being that knows no limitation.
Thanks,
Action.
Mona.
Yep,
I'll take a turn.
yep.
Action that is aimed at attaining God is truly intelligent and spiritually fruitful because it brings release from bondage. It is second only to that action which springs spontaneously from the state of divine knowledge itself. All other forms of action, however good or bad, and however effective or ineffective from the worldly point of view, contribute to a bondage of the soul, and as such are inferior to inaction. Inaction is less helpful than intelligent action, but it is better than unintelligent action, for it amounts to the non doing of that which would have created a binding. The transition from unintelligent action to intelligent action, that is, from binding karma to unbinding karma, is often through inaction. This is the stage when unintelligent action has stopped because of critical doubt, and intelligent action has not yet begun because adequate momentum has not been achieved. This special type of inaction, which plays a definite part in progress on the path, should not be confused with ordinary inaction that springs from inertia or fear of life. The state of inaction that springs from critical doubt gives way sooner or later to intelligent action. And intelligent action, in turn, is dissolved in the final goal of perfect inaction. Perfect inaction does not mean inactivity. When self is absent, one achieves inaction in one's every action. However excessive it be, various of the yogas, such as karma yoga and Dhyanan yoga, can be instrumental in achieving the end of all action by practicing inaction in the midst of intense activity. The only way to live a life of absolute inaction is to surrender completely to a perfect master. Then one dies entirely to oneself and lives only for the perfect master, acting and fulfilling the dictates of the beloved one. Each age group, each profession, each race has its own problems in pointing itself towards the beginning stages of the path. The following brief messages are intended for various of these groups. Message for youngsters. I remember very well when, not long ago, I was just like one of you. You little ones are especially dear to me. Children are innocent and free from vain egotism. Children have no low desires. When, after becoming free from all childishness, man really becomes childlike, he realizes God. Whether you like it or not, you must soon grow up and cease being childish. More and more, you must enjoy letting your teachers teach you and your elders lead you while you are growing into men and women. Unless you are willing to learn and ready to obey, they cannot help you as they would like to do. The whole of life is like playing the game of hide and seek, in which you must find your real self. I give you all my blessings, or I give you my blessings, that you may succeed in this realization that life is all time play. God alone is real, all else is false. And so you must try to love God who is within us all. To gain this love, you should try to be honest in your thoughts, words, and actions. Mahu, could you continue, please?
Yes. To youth. It is the privilege of youth to be full of energy and hope, not being caught in any ruts. Your dreams of the future have the advantage of being inspired by an unfettered imagination. In the glow of a newborn love, or in the warmth of a newly caught enthusiasm, you are quick to respond to the call for action and sacrifice. Life would be poorer without these qualities that are predominantly present in youth. But if you are to derive the full benefit of the qualities with which you are abundantly endowed, you must also try to acquire some other qualities which are rare in youth. Hope should be fortified by a courage which can accept failure without upset. Enthusiasm should be harnessed by the wisdom that knows how to wait with patience for the fruit of action. Idealistic dreams about the future should be balanced by a sense of the realities of the present. And the glow of love should allow itself to be illumined by the full exercise of reason. It is easy for youth to be so absorbed in realizing the ideal that it becomes bitter against the present and the past. But it is as well to cultivate a spirit of idealizing the real, which being appreciative of the heritage of the past. I read this part again, but it is as well to cultivate a spirit of idealizing the real, which being appreciative of the heritage of the past. The
So
world
that's while being
while
appreciative.
being, did I say when? Yeah,
Which?
while being. I said which, yeah. While being appreciative of the heritage of the past. The world as it is may not seem to conform to the pattern which youth adores, but you must never forget that it is always good enough to merit your most loving attention. In your desire to improve the world, do not be do not by becoming bitter surrender your right to be happy. Youths love freedom and therefore has a natural impulse to rebel against all of authorities. This is well and good, but you should make a real effort to keep free of the many illusions to which youth is particularly susceptible. True self-expression need not include irreverence of others. True criticism need not involve snobbishness or cynicism. True freedom need not manifest hostility or separateness. Freedom without responsibility is a doubtful boon. Freedom is worth having only where there is self-restraint and willingness to cooperate with others. Youth is always willing to act and take risks. It should be allowed to yield freely to this fearless and imperative urge of life within. But while engaged in action, youth must take every care that it is creative and not destructive. Let your watchwords always be love and service. Capital love and capital service. To students, artists, social workers, and public institution servants. Literacy is not education, and education is not culture. And all this together do not constitute deniam or gnosis. This stands in a class by itself, independently of any concomitant factors. Illiteracy and ignorance invite exploitation, but literacy can also become a willing tool in the hands of those who exploit. Education devoid of culture. Education devoid of culture is inherently destructive, although on the surface it seems to represent progress. Since all types of people have claimed that their greatness constitutes quote unquote culture, the world has become redefined in the minds of the public. True culture is the result of spiritual values assimilated into life. Therefore, you must keep before you the ideal of that spiritual culture, which once developed imparts life and beauty to all undertakings, educational, technical, industrial, social, moral, and political, and pierces through their differences to produce unity. This results in the development of the highest character in the life of a nation or individual. All men in the flesh are unquestionably equal, yet no two men are equal. I repeat this again. All men in the flesh are unquestionably equal, but not two men are equal. Despite the fact that the one sun shines on the one world, sunshine is not the same the world over. In their hopes and their fears, men are the same everywhere, yet at a given moment, this one is antagonistic to that one. Love for God, love for fellow beings, love for service, and love of self-sacrifice. In short, love in any shape and form is the finest give and take in existence. Ultimately, it is love that will bring about the much desired equating of human beings all over the world, and without necessarily disturbing the inherently diverse traits of mankind. It is infinitely better to hope for the best than to fear the worst. Time is composed equally of night and day. In its inevitable course of ups and downs, the world is fast approaching once again a glorious dawn. My blessings to you all.
Thank you, Mahu. Rolf, would you like to take a turn reading? And please read slowly.
To Harijans and laborers, How's the sound?
Good.
Good?
Yep. Loud and clear.
Okay. Been having trouble with it. To think that birth or profession is the basis for difference between men is to dream in the past and remain dead to the present. In those things which represent true value in human heritage, all men are equal. Cleanliness of mind and body have never been and never can be the monopoly of any one class or creed. They should be aspired to and can be achieved by everyone. At the same time, it should be recognized that to maintain such purity in the face of increasing opposition from various directions will entail suffering. The spiritual status of any people is in direct proportion to, to its ability to suffer. Suffering should be intelligent and deeply penetrating. When a people develop their spiritual outlook on life, they automatically increase their capacity to suffer. Selfishness multiplied by population results in war, exploitation, persecution, and poverty. Selflessness multiplied by population brings about peace and plenty. All the modern fads rampant in the guise of politics, economics, materialism, communism, nationalism, and socialism must be judged by the criterion of selflessness. Whether you are religiously suppressed or politically oppressed, whether you are exploited economically or sweated industrially, the suffering you endure will determine your spiritual position. Man-made differences, like all other things made by man, take no time to change in changing times. A great changeover is approaching in which rights must and will be restored, and in which responsibilities uh, must be shouldered. It is indeed great to be a man, but it is far greater to be man to man, irrespective of birth levels and belief tables. My blessing to all those who feel themselves oppressed, depressed, or suppressed for any cause whatsoever. That's the end of that message, Eugene.
Oh, go
That
ahead with the next one. The general.
continue.
Yes,
But
please.
let me just, I need to wet this, my little whistle here. General message. What is wrong with the world today? Such questions are bound to arise in thinking minds, but often the answers given are not completely honest. Diagnosis given and remedies adopted have all been biased, and so the situation remains vague and unresolved. The crux of the matter lies in the correct reinterpretation of the ancient word religion. The West has very little religion, and whenever one hears of it, it is either subservient to politics or at best an adjunct of material life. The East is suffering from an overdose of religion, and consequently, it hankers desperately for a material antidote. Religion in the West is synonymous with scientific progress, which is distinctive in its manifestation. Religion in the East, and in India in particular, has gone underground and been replaced largely by crude ceremonies, vague rituals, and lifeless dogmas, instead of nourishing the seeds of peace and plenty. This subterranean religion tries to propagate communism, fanaticism, nationalism, and patriotism, which have now become bywords associated with leadership and greatness, suffering and sanctity. In short, religion as a living force has become obsolete.
Thanks, Ralph.
Uh, Thank you, J. Baba. Got a paragraph remaining.
Mona, are you ready to read again, Mona?
Yeah, I can.
We'll each do 5 minutes now for the remaining time, so it's
Okay.
shorter.
The urgent need of today to resi- resuscitate religion is to dig it out of its narrow, dark vault and let the spirit of man shine out once again in its pristine glory. The most practical thing in the world is to be spiritually minded. It needs no special time, place, or circumstance. It is not necessarily concerned with anything out of the ordinary daily routine. It is never too early or too late to be spiritual. It is just a simple question of having the proper mental attitude towards lasting value, changing circumstance, and avoidable eventualities, as well as a healthy sense of the inevitable. Spirituality is not restricted to, nor can it be restricted by anyone or anything, um, anywhere, at any time. It covers all life for all time, and it can be easily achieved through selfless service and that pure love which knows no bondage and seeks no boundary. A mighty surge of the spirituality is about to sweep over the world. My blessings to you all. There is no more ready means by which the first outlines of the inner self can be known than through complete honesty. Honesty with one's fellow beings is the beginning step. From this, there cannot help but come honesty with oneself. It is heartening to find that even the worst of one's nature is not frightening, and that the very fact of having faced the worst in oneself gives the courage to look at the challenges of life and the path. Having achieved honesty and found courage, the sustaining self begins to reveal itself. To be honest is certainly not easy, for never before has dishonesty and hypocrisy been so rampant in this world as today. If the least hypocrisy creeps into one's thoughts, words, or deeds, God, who is the innermost self in us all, keeps himself hidden. Hypocrisy is a million headed cobra. Today, there are so called saints in the world who tell people to be honest and not hypocritical. Yet, they themselves are deeply involved in dishonesty. If you cannot love God and cannot lead saintly lives, then at least do not make a pretense of it. The worst scoundrel is better than a hypocritical saint. Honesty is not only a light on the inner path, it is also one of the most effective means for relief of the suffering which afflicts all, man or woman, rich or poor, great or small. Relief from all kinds of suffering is within ourselves. If in all circumstances and in every walk of life we try to think honestly, act honestly, and live honestly, infinite honesty is one of the aspects of God, and therefore the least hypocrisy in ourselves keeps us aloof from God. Sim-
Thanks.
yeah.
Thanks, Mona. Mahu, please.
Simplicity and all it implies is another great aid in the development of human love. Simplicity springs from humility, and humility is often confused with modesty. Modesty is weakness, but humility is strength. Therefore, a world of difference separates the two. The moment you say, I say in all humility, the very use of the expression betrays your ego, even though you believe that you are being humble. You believe you are being humble, you're expressing your egotism. The difficulty is not resolved even if you try with true honesty to express true humility. Inevitably, obstacles arise, such as the thought of what others may think of your expression of humility. No sooner is humility given expression than it is no longer humility. It is nonsense to give deliberate expression to humility. A life of humility is lived spontaneously and should not give rise to thoughts of either humility or modesty. As an example, suppose you start to clean a latrine, but you cannot help noting the smell. A janitor that has cleaned them all his life remains unaffected. The person who parades humility is like the one who notes the smell while cleaning a latrine. The person who lives the life of humility is like the sweeper who is immune to the odor and completely unworried about what others think of him. He actually lives the life of janitor. To have to try to be humble is also nonsense. You must be so natural that your life becomes humility personified, which means all strength freed from all weakness. So, whatever you are, express it unmindful of public opinion and the reaction of others. Be natural. If you are dishonest, do not try to hide yourself behind the curtain of honesty. This does not mean, though, that you should be dishonest. Above all else, be content with your lot, rich or poor, happy or miserable. Understand that God has designed it for your own good and be resigned to his will. Remember the present in the frame of the past. Remember the present in the frame of the past and the future. You eternally were and always will be. You have had innumerable forms as man and woman, beautiful and ugly, strong and weak, healthy and sickly, powerful and helpless, and now you're here again in another form.
Thank you, Mahu. Ralph, would you like to read again?
You know, until you gain spiritual freedom, you will be invested with many such forms. So why seek temporary relief now, which would only result in further bindings later? Do not ask God for money, fame, power, health, or children, but seek his grace, and it will lead you to eternal bliss. One of the greatest things to possess is faith, which ultimately leads to conviction. And from conviction, one day arises realization. There are no two kinds of faith. Faith is the last thing to be labeled. The only question is whether one has strong faith or weak faith. Some some manifest faith only to the point of acknowledging forms and ceremonies, while some go beyond this to seek the kernel and eschew the whole, believing either in the impersonal infinite existence or in the personal existence of one's own master. Thus, it is only a question of degree of faith. In wholehearted faith, relief will be found from the many sufferings which afflict man. We are already in possession of infinite power and happiness, but it is our way of life which prevents us from enjoying these eternal treasures of God. Faith can provide a key to attain them. Eventually, faith must give way to conviction. For after all, faith is only faith. There are two kinds of experience: external and internal. External experience can result through the gross media. What we actually see of the gross world with our gross eyes gives us conviction of a sort. But there are occasions when even this conviction is based on incorrect analysis. Thus, if we see a man drinking milk from a bottle under a toddy tree, we assume unconsciously that he is drinking toddy, which is incorrect. What is seen with the inner eye gives absolute conviction and can never be false. Such is the case, for example, when one sees with the inner eye that God is the infinite existence.
Thank you, Rolf.
Thank you, J Bob.
Therefore, what is really needed to give eternal conviction is not mere theorizing or reasoning or even faith, but actual inner experience. Once God has been realized, there is no question of faith or even of conviction, just as there is no question of man's needing faith to believe that he is a man. Having transcended the boundaries of faith, one finds oneself identified with the infinite and the one self manifested everywhere. Oh, so there's an explanation of toddy, which is a cheap, intoxicating drink and is commonly made in India from the sap of the toddy tree. So here we are finishing page 185. We'll start at 186 next week.
Was what Baba's father had the toddy shops.
Yeah, maybe Mona knows
The
what
toddy,
kind of tree is a toddy tree.
I'm sorry, I won't be able to say much on that, but I do remember reading